Well, I'm 90 years old, which surprises me, but that's how old I am. And I had a very colorful, to put it in a mild way, colorful life. I'm a Holocaust survivor. I was with my parents, grandparents, and everybody else. We were living in Czechoslovakia and occupied by Nazi Germany, and we were all assembled into ghettos, and from there sent to Auschwitz concentration camp, and everybody was murdered except my sister and I. Today it wouldn't be possible to cover up something like that, but in those days it was. I know my father we had to close the windows. He was listening to London radio. He wanted to find out what the real story is, and he did find out a lot of things. And so I remember this all my life, that when our train stopped in Auschwitz, he looked out the window and he said, "Oh, people work here, that's good." He thought that we will be all killed. So he knew some things I, of course, didn't know. I was 16 years old, and I wasn't informed. But the fact is that these things were going on, and people didn't understand, because there was not communication as it is today. I know only that, I always remember that when we were leaving Auschwitz, we were there, my group, for 2 weeks, and we were at the entrance. There was a little house, and they put us into that house, my group, and we were there all night, and then they let us out in the morning, and the people who worked there, prisoners, said, "Well, you should now pray and thank God, because people don't come out alive from this little house." It was a gas chamber, and they kept us in there all night, depending of whether the train will arrive to take us to where we were supposed to go. It was a work camp. And we had no clue. I mean, where would you find this kind of information? And they just said, "You should pray now because you've been saved, your life has been saved." The other prisoners. And that's all I remember. We were there all night in that little space. I was not brought up religious. So I wasn't in any way, how should I say that, disappointed in what happened. Like some of my friends, most of my friends thought that we were somehow punished by God, that we did things that were not right, and so that was the punishment, that we have lived through this horrible time. But I was always a rebellious type, so I was yelling at my friends who were praying, and I said, "Who are you praying to? Who lets this happen to us? How is he almighty and lets us being murdered this way?" So I was always rebellious. But people reacted differently, Some got more religious. They said, "Well, we've been saved." And I told them, "But what about those who haven't been saved? what makes you deserve being saved, and those were not. So, it was a question of attitude, but most of the people I knew after the war, Jewish people, were continued to go to temple and pray and observe Jewish holidays and so forth. I didn't, but they did. Nothing can compare to Nazi concentration camps in today's world, because it would be known and seen and cause such outrage, and that's not just that I hope for that. I'm pretty sure this would not be tolerated in any ways. We had an uncle and an aunt who survived the camps, and they took us in. My sister and I was 16, my sister was 19. So, and they sent us back to school to try to create a normal life for us. He was visiting there for a few days, and I met her. I like to say that because it's funny. I met him at the swimming pool, and so there wasn't too much more to see. When Israel was created in 1948, my husband at that time, we were newly married, and my sister and most my friends of my age volunteered to the Israeli army.
Wow.
So we were members of the Haganah, Israeli army. I was very disappointed because married women at the time could only serve in reserve. My sister was not married, and she was a regular member of the army. She was an officer, actually, and I was very jealous about that. But anyway, so we lived in Israel for a long time. Everybody there at the time came from somewhere else, and we had to learn to live together and tolerate each other. but it was very idealistic, and we were, I think, in retrospect, I think we were happy, because it was something we had never experienced before. We always lived, other people and ourselves, my husband and I, my sister, we lived in countries where anti-Semitism was a common thing, and we grew up with that, and being Jewish was not a good thing. So this was a liberation for us. Israel was very important to me because I felt that that Jews needed to be independent and needed to have enough power to defend themselves. And so that Zionism was all about that. So that was something that appealed to me. My husband was a physician. I was married, and my husband was a physician, and he got a scholarship for 1 year to the United Nations based on a research study he wrote. And so when we were here for that 1 year, he was offered a job here. And I always, from childhood on, was doing artwork on my own. I didn't really have to study because I was all equipped inside and creating artwork. And so when I came here, my husband finished his medical school before we came here, and he said, I'm done now, you go to school and you get a degree, because it's important to have a piece of paper and so forth. And I did go to, it was an art school in Baltimore, Maryland, where we settled at the time. I was doing things on my own all my life, and when I came to the school, the teacher said, you just keep on doing what you're doing, you don't need instruction. So I was independent from that point of view. I have 2 sons, and I have 3 grandsons, and I have 1 granddaughter, and she wrote me a letter about a year ago or so. Grandma, I'm so happy to have you, so we can at least have a girl talk. Because the whole family are male. So that was my fun part. They're all male, except the 2 of us, she and I. I like to see my grandchildren, the next generation, and what they are up to, and how they judge things in comparison with myself in their time, when I was their age. And I just, I feel very lucky that they didn't move far away. They all stayed here. I have this joke that I always say the wives couldn't convince them to leave me, go too far away. But I can't complain. I think I'm lucky.